Now to an I-Team investigation. It involves women panhandling with babies by their side. Now, you may have seen them on the streets, on the bus, even the subway, asking for money.
And while you may be compelled to open your wallet out of kindness, you may feel differently after you see what the I-Team found. Here's News 4's Melissa Russo.
When it comes to panhandlers, New Yorkers think they've seen it all. But recently, we noticed something different, even disturbing. Women begging with babies.
And we saw enough of them right here in the streets of Midtown that it made us wonder, could this possibly be a coincidence?
The infants and toddlers spend long hours camped out on busy city sidewalks or noisy subway platforms. Some of the little ones stay unusually still from day into night, making you wonder if they're dolls. But they're not. They're real children with diapers that are changed on the pavement and sniffles that persist in the cool autumn air.
Have you gone to the city for help with like social services or anything?
No, but I'm going.
She sounds sick. The baby sounds sick.
She has a cold. What can I do? I don't have a job.
If panhandling with children is a job, it's a lucrative one. We watch as the women collect several handouts a minute.
Well, I gave her $2. She was with a child. She's hungry.
Still, others say something about this just doesn't sit right.
I wouldn't sit there with my kid.
You have plenty of government services they can get.
I think it's a setup.
When I see these women out there, I'm looking at a scam, a business.
George McDonald runs a charity called the Dough Fund, which helps the homeless get back on their feet. He employs dozens of people working in Midtown and says they've witnessed the women's patterns.
It's a group of women who trade off the same children, that they work in shifts. We have a network of not-for-profits that could certainly help these women if indeed they were looking for help, which they are not.
Service providers tell the I-Team the women refuse shelter and services. They just want cash. In undercover interviews, one woman tells us she's jobless from Romania.
I live with my mother. I have a apartment.
Another says she needs to make money for a hotel, though it's worth noting city homeless shelters are free. In recent weeks, we documented at least 9 women begging with babies, mostly on Midtown sidewalks. They may need the money, but the way they earn it doesn't seem to be coincidence. The I-Team found they know each other. We followed them, commuting together and meeting for lunch. During their breaks, they browse stores and share ice cream. This woman in blue appears to help organize, making rounds throughout the day. At night, they meet at Grand Central to ride the C train together to a building in East New York. So if this is their job, then are the babies working too?
What begins to make this smell like child labor is the organized nature of it.
Panhandling is legal on the streets, but not the subways. But how about with a baby? A long-standing state law makes it a misdemeanor to use a child in begging or picking rags, a sign of just how old that law is. But the police, based on what the I-Team observed, don't seem to enforce it, though they do sometimes warn the women of potential consequences.
You want to keep that baby. Somebody's going to call 911. They're going to show up and see that your daughter is eating off the ground. They're going to call child services.
I have not seen it. I have not heard of it.
Children's Services Commissioner Gladys Carrion tells the I-Team she's surprised nobody has called, including the police.
It really is disturbing that no one would think of calling that in.
She says if someone did call in a report, an investigation would look at the reasons for begging with babies and whether the children's basic needs are being met.
We're from Channel 4.
Our own attempts to get answers didn't produce any.
Is it appropriate for children to be on the street all day begging for money? Why are you walking away? Are you working together with the other moms?
Clearly, the women were not interested in speaking to the I-Team. We were shoved, twerked, repeatedly given the finger. That was our producer's phone being smacked to the ground by this woman who blamed the president for not giving her papers to work in this country.
I would venture to say that it's not right to have children, in the street, serving as props to be able to get money.
And speaking of that money, after hearing what the I-Team found, some of those generous passersby say they'd think twice about giving again.
Because you don't want to be used, right?
Yeah, New Yorkers can cross the line between sympathy and skepticism pretty quickly. And speaking of crossing lines, in the process of witnessing all of this over the last few weeks, we didn't feel that we should file an official complaint against these women because journalistically that's not our role. But as you just saw, we did bring the situation to the attention of local child welfare officials and police officials, the NYPD telling us that they judge these cases one at a time.
Tonight, the mayor and top city leaders are vowing change after News 4's exclusive investigation revealed what appears to be a team of women working together, panhandling on the streets of the city, using babies to bring in bigger handouts. Here's Melissa Russo with the I-Team update.
I appreciated that report a lot, and as a parent, I was very, very troubled.
Mayor de Blasio disturbed at what our I-Team investigation found, that women working together are using babies to panhandle all over Manhattan. The mayor says in response to our investigation, he's directed the NYPD to get to the bottom of it.
NYPD is on the situation right now.
In recent weeks, we documented at least 9 women begging with babies, mostly on Midtown sidewalks. They may need the money, but the way they earn it doesn't seem to be coincidence. The I-Team found they know each other. We followed them, commuting together and meeting for lunch. Nonprofits that help the needy tell the I-Team the women refuse shelter and services because all they really want is cash.
It's a group of women who trade off the same children, that they work in shifts. We have a network of not-for-profits that could certainly help these women if indeed they were looking for help, which they are not.
When the women are approached by undercover members of the I-Team and offered money, they're willing to stop and chat.
I live with my mother. I have an apartment.
The same women respond very differently when questioned with a camera instead of cash.
You are very crazy.
A long-standing state law makes it a misdemeanor to use a child in begging or picking rags, a sign of just how old that law is. But the police, based on what the I-Team observed, don't seem to enforce it, though they do sometimes warn the women of potential consequences.
You want to keep that baby. Somebody's going to call 911. They're going to show up and see that your daughter is getting off the ground. They're going to call child services.
I have not seen it. I have not heard of it.
Children's Services Commissioner Gladys Carrion tells the I-Team she's surprised nobody has called, including the police.
It really is disturbing that no one would think of calling that in.
Clearly, the women were not interested in speaking to the I-Team. We were shoved, twerked, repeatedly given the finger. That was our producer's phone being smacked to the ground by this woman who blamed the president for not giving her papers to work in this country.
The city has an executive order that they can avail themselves of city services without their immigration status being asked. And obviously the welfare of the child is first and foremost in any situation.
The folks who are actually scamming their fellow New Yorkers and using their children as pawns, that's disgusting.
Many viewers got in touch with us via social media after seeing this story, and several were really angry, saying they did call 911 to report this. One retired teacher even told me that she called the state's child abuse hotline, which is exactly how you're supposed to report suspected neglect in New York State. But she says she was told that they couldn't even take the case and open an investigation since she was only able to provide a location and a description, but not a name or an address for the woman. I mean, how would she know their name or address?
Now to an I-Team investigation that has the city's top law enforcement officials promising an investigation. News 4's Melissa Russo uncovered women begging on the streets with toddlers and babies by their side, and it appears to be a ploy to bring in bigger bucks. Melissa, you spoke with the police commissioner today. What's your update?
David, Police Commissioner Bill Bratton this afternoon here at City Hall promising to take a closer look at the laws around panhandling with children after we uncovered women working the streets with babies all over Midtown and on subway platforms. A lot of people have noticed them. New Yorkers tell us they've had emotional reactions. Some have given them money, others feel it's inappropriate. We've noticed them individually. We decided to follow them. And what we found out was that they know each other. They commute together. They eat lunch together. They travel back to the same building in Brooklyn together. They refuse help from social service agencies, shelter, food. They say no thank you. They just want cash. Now, while panhandling is not illegal on the streets of New York City, there is an obscure old law that says it's a misdemeanor to use children to panhandle. But Is that the same thing as neglect? Not necessarily. But officials are telling us today they don't like it.
Being quite frank with you, that you raised the issue, I've not seen that activity as I've moved around the city. So it's something I know that you did an earlier story on. So now that we're aware of it, we'll take a look at it, because it's not an activity that we would certainly condone or support or want to see continue. As in all things with the law, the devil's in the details, and you have to act in conformity with whatever laws are in existence.
Mayor de Blasio told us yesterday that he would put the NYPD on the case. During our reporting, we did see police warning these women that Children's Services could take their babies away, but the Children's Services Commissioner told us she didn't know anything about this problem. Today, City Hall sources telling us that Mayor de Blasio has put on the agenda for his very next meeting of the Children's Cabinet this subject. The Children's Cabinet is something the mayor created, an interagency working group that tries to tackle complicated problems that deal with children. That group will be meeting early next month, and we're told that Mayor de Blasio has put this issue at the top of their agenda. We're live in Lower Manhattan tonight. Melissa Russo, News 4, New York.
A week after the I-Team uncovered a group of women working together using babies and toddlers as props for panhandling, the New Yorkers are still outraged.
And some say they've tried to take action by reporting those women to the police and to the child abuse hotline. But as Melissa Russo learned, they're not getting very far. Here's her I-Team follow-up.
Women begging with babies all over Midtown, holding toddlers who stay unusually still. Day after day, into the night, pleading for help, collecting cash, refusing shelter and services. After the I-Team showed the women sharing ice cream together, commuting together, and generally working together, New Yorkers like John Freya were outraged.
And I saw this woman and one of the children that were featured on your report, and people were giving them money, and it kind of just infuriated me that they're back at it again.
John is one of many people who saw the I-Team story and then tried to take action. When he encountered one woman back at it again on 43rd and 5th, he tweeted her picture and called the New York State Child Abuse Hotline. But they told him they could not take his complaint. Why?
She said, unfortunately, there's nothing that they can do. We would need a location of where to find them, like where they reside.
John is not alone. Several other New Yorkers tell us they've had the same unsatisfying experience. A spokeswoman for the New York State Office of Children and Family Services, which runs the hotline, confirms they've received multiple recent complaints from concerned New Yorkers like John, who were worried about the welfare of babies used for begging, but were unable to provide identifying information and evidence of harm to the child. She said, in the absence of that information, we are unable to initiate an investigation.
I kind of felt let down because you're trying to do something good, and even though they said, thank you for calling and, we applaud you, it still didn't stop the problem.
This may be part of the reason why local child welfare investigators told us this issue was not on their radar, despite a new ad campaign urging New Yorkers to speak up when they suspect neglect.
It really is disturbing that no one would think of calling that in.
With the hotline not taking complaints, the begging continues. Last night, we found this woman and little girl in a chilly L-train walkway. Based on some new viewer pictures, some men may be taking over some of the women's so-called shifts. And viewers have also complained their calls to 911 have been fruitless. An NYPD spokesman tells the I-Team the mere act of panhandling with a baby is not a crime and isn't necessarily child endangerment either. But the police commissioner tells us the local laws may have to change.
So now that we're aware of it, we'll take a look at it, because it's not an activity that we would certainly condone or support or want to see continue.
And now to an I-Team update. News 4 broke the details about a group of women working together and panhandling with young children.
We brought it to the attention of city leaders, and today they took the first steps to address the situation. Here's the I-Team's Melissa Russo.
You may have seen them on the sidewalks or subways begging with their babies. Maybe you felt sorry for them or even gave them some cash.
How much money did you give her?
$5. After the I-Team reported they're an organized group that travels together, refuses social services, is not homeless, and uses these babies as bait, Mayor de Blasio said he would see if he could stop them.
That's horrendous and deeply unfair to those children.
At City Hall today, the de Blasio administration took up the issue at a meeting of the Children's Cabinet, a new working group chaired by First Lady Chirlane McCray and attended by high-ranking police, children's services, health, welfare, and school officials.
Today we talked about the panhandling problem, and thanks to the investigative work of NBC4, we knew some of the spots. We've been talking about it.
Child advocates say solving this problem will require city agencies to get creative.
It's not only a police decision, it's not only a children's services decision. This is the ideal issue for Mayor de Blasio's Children's Cabinet.
Why is stopping this practice so complicated? The NYPD tells the I-Team while panhandling with a child on the street may be disturbing, it's not a crime, nor is it necessarily neglect unless there's demonstrable harm to the child. And as we reported, ACS has been unable to investigate if there is harm or neglect. Why? We've learned that even though many concerned New Yorkers have called the state's child abuse hotline to report these women, the state won't open any investigations without their names or addresses.
That's a challenge, and we recognize that challenge, which is why NYPD and ACS are working together to explore ways to address the issue.
Commissioner Carrion and ACS are working with the NYPD to make the situation better. These children should not be on the streets.
And with that in mind, the police department and the Administration for Children's Services have scheduled yet another meeting for tomorrow on this very subject.
Well, Melissa, before you go, Rebecca Katz says they're working with the NYPD, but what can they do if it's not a crime and there's no obvious signs of neglect?
It's true, and since our first story aired, Police Commissioner Bratton has said these women do have the right to ask for money on the street. They're not aggressively chasing people down and asking for money. But he also told me at one point that if the laws on the books don't work in their current form to stop this, maybe there needs to be a new law passed. Also, perhaps maybe the police and the child welfare officials could come up with a better way to respond when people actually spot these women on the street and call in to say that they're concerned about the children.
And so they remain on the streets for now.
We haven't seen them quite as often. We still get some reports from our viewers who've been keeping track of this on social media and letting us know. We've seen more of them on the subways in recent weeks than on the streets in this colder weather.
Eyes wide open now, Melissa. Thank you.